Good morning and welcome to another session of Preaching and Preachers. I'm Dr. Martha Simmons and today's subject is you do not have to hoop to be heard. You do not have to hoop to be heard. Wherever I go and preach or teach, I am still asked, what if I can't hoop? How will that impact my preaching? In fact, as recently as last week, I was with a group of preachers and teaching a session, and one of the first questions that came up was, do I have to be a hooper and rub my hand over my head and kick up my leg and etc. All of the caricatures that people use to describe hooping. And I love hooping, so I would never caricature it. Hooping is a great art form. In fact, I think it's one of the greatest art forms ever brought to the art form of preaching. And so I love it, and I hope it continues long after I'm no longer on the planet. But the truth of the matter is, hooping is being done less and less, and that will continue to happen for so many reasons. Number one, the preachers who are leading the largest churches in America, all over America, preachers of all ages, those in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and beyond, most of them are not hoopers. And for women especially, you no longer need to have this concern because the leading women pastors and the leading women orators and preachers and academicians are not hoopers. Women have never had as many examples as men have had to learn how to preach. Plus, we still have in many communities, and certainly we had this when I began preaching, you were thought of as mannish or manly, even if you attempted to hoop. That never bothered me because I knew who I was and I loved hooping. So I did it. But I remembered what was said if you did attempt to hoop. But now women have even fewer examples of how to hoop, so women are just almost not doing it. As I said, I love it, and I hope it continues. But the truth of the matter is, you don't have to hoop to be heard. You just do not have to hoop to be heard. As I said in a session 2 or 3 weeks ago, the first thing you have to do to be heard is to make sure that you present your best you, your real you, if you want to get a hearing. But nowadays, if you really want to get a hearing, you have to preach with energy. With energy. No longer are congregations willing to sit and wait for 25 or 30 minutes until a preacher gets to the end of a sermon and then unleashes their energy or their hoop. Now, people want the energy straight out the gate. I call this fire out the gate. People are looking to be moved in the first 3 to 5 minutes of the sermon. So, if you are not a hooper, what should you be doing? Well, one of the art forms that we've seen over the last 25 to 30 years, which has proven to be a great one, is the use of cadence. Just cadence. Cadence, unlike hooping, has no melody in it. So if you listen to people like Charles Adams, and after Adams there was of course Freddie Haynes, who has preached everywhere for everyone, and he is well known. And the reason so many people wanted to hear him preach was because of his remarkable use of cadence and speed. When people would who hadn't heard him before would listen to him, they would say, I wonder if he takes a breath. Well, of course he did. It's just that his speech was so quick and his cadence and the speed made it powerful. So spoken speech sped up and done well produces energy in a room. It's powerful. So that's what you need now. Design your sermon so that there is fire out the gate. Ask yourself this question as you're preparing your sermon. What would bring me to my feet? And I'm not saying to do this in a way that you're manipulating. What I'm saying is write intentionally for energy. Write so that the energy comes to the congregation from you. Look at the words on your page and ask yourself, if I heard these words, would they bring me to my feet? If they will bring you to your feet, they will more than likely bring the same response from the congregation. So bring the fire out the gate and keep bringing it and bringing it and bringing it throughout the sermon. Remember, I said the new watchword for the 21st century is energy. It is energy. Preach with speed, use cadence. Go on YouTube and look for preachers such as Freddie Haynes, Charles Adams, Jasmine Scurlock, Shalita Farmby. They all have great energy and they use cadence. But even if you can't, if you say cadence doesn't really fit me, I guarantee you that with practice you can speed up if you want to speed up. Even at my age, a few years ago, I decided to speed up, and it has added an amazing amount of energy to my preaching. I love it, and I want to recommend it to you. Listen to your sermons, play them back, and ask yourself, could I have sped up there, and then practice it. Another thing that will help you speed up is shortening your sentences. People hear well if you speak in short sentences packed with colors and sights and sounds that people can see and experience almost viscerally. So you want to do that. Another thing that will help you is to make sure, as I said, that your energy starts immediately. Do not wait until the last 5 minutes of your sermon to say, I am going to take my sermon up higher here. No, you want to start out high and build and build and build and build and finally get to the top of the mountain. So every 3-5 minutes in that sermon, make sure that you have written it so that someone wants to jump to their feet in agreement because you have said something that is so powerful. They had to respond. They had to raise their hand, or as I said, come to their feet. So, you don't have to hoop to be heard, but you do have to be energetic. People are not coming to church. They're not tuning in online to hear a dull sermon. And so often, and this continues in the black church, we say that if you are emotional, you are not being intellectual. That is absurd. No matter how intellectual you are, no matter how smart you are, no matter how well you have exegeted the text, no one wants to hear you if you are dull. And the opposite of dull, of course, is exciting. It's passionate. We serve a God that should cause us to be excited when we are talking about God, when we are delivering the gospel. Bring that passion to the pulpit. Bring it to your people. We preach about life and death matters. This shouldn't be boring. And you don't need a hoop to be exciting, to be interesting, to be passionate. but the passion begins with you. If you looked at the sermon and it bored you, it will bore your people. Another thing I want to encourage you to do, as you're learning how to speed up, you're learning how to speak with energy and passion, is to study those who preach with passion and energy, especially those who have sped up their sermons. Watch them online. Go and hear them live. Go and see what you want to be. Finally, I would encourage you, get a preaching buddy. Get a preaching buddy. Someone who is honest, someone who is a good preacher, and someone who respects your preaching voice. And from time to time, share your preaching ideas with them. They will help you to understand why something that you said had impact, or why it did not have impact as you were bringing a text forward. And the more you work with a preaching buddy, the more you will come to respect your own preaching voice, and you will come to understand what others are hearing you say. Not just what you believe you're saying, but what you are actually saying. A preaching buddy, and you may end up with a group. In fact, one of the things that I'm going to do in the future for the Women of Color in Ministry project is to work with women online, and we're just going to preach, and especially work on closing sermons well and opening sermons well. You will learn a lot about yourself if you allow other people to hear and critique you. Last but not least, certainly I want to say, if you want to know more about cadence, if you want to know more about energy and preaching with passion, I urge you to get a copy of my book, Doing the Deed, The Mechanics of 21st Century Preaching. You can get it on Amazon. I promise that it will help you with the notion of not hooping and still being heard. Not hooping, but preaching with energy. Not hooping, but knowing that you can go to any church, regardless of the denomination, at any time and get a good hearing. God bless you. This has been another session of Preaching and Preachers. I encourage you to join me next Monday. We're on Monday, every Monday at 11 a.m. on Periscope, and then following that on Facebook Live. We've got some great topics coming up. We're going to talk about why a sermon dies. We're going to talk about sermon exegesis and preaching this month. And then just before this critical election that we have coming up, we're going to talk about what to preach in election season. God bless you. Have a great week. And preach with passion this coming Sunday. Or if you're preaching this week, God bless. Preach hard. Preach with passion.